In this video, we will look at everything you need to know about part 3 of the IELTS speaking exam. Now, if you've already seen part 1 and 2, well done for making it this far. I will leave a link in the description section below. Now, let's begin. This video will be broken down in the following way. So first, we will look at the content, then the duration of this part of the speaking exam, the number of questions. I will also give you some example questions, and then I will explain how you can answer these questions. Now let's begin with the content. The content for part 3 will be exactly the same as the content in part 2. Let me explain. So if in part 2 you were asked to describe an object, part 3 will also be based on an object. However, there are two main differences. The first one is that in part 3, it will be a back and forth session between you and the examiner. So part 2 was just you speaking, part 3 will be a discussion. And the second difference is that part 3, the theme that you will be discussing will be very general. That means you don't need to get into too much detail, unlike part 2. Now let's talk about the length of this part of the exam. Well, just like part 1, this section will also last anywhere between 4 and 5 minutes. Usually there's about 12 questions. The number of questions in this section may vary. It all depends on how many questions you can answer within the 4 or 5 minutes that you are given. So for example, if you give short answers, that means that you will be able to answer lots of questions. Whereas if you give long, detailed, lengthy answers, you will only be able to answer a few questions. Now the aim here is quality over quantity. That means that you shouldn't worry about answering too many questions. That's not the aim. Again, just like part 2, it is better for you to focus on fewer questions but give great answers. Now on the screen, you will be able to see some example questions. So let's go through them. So the theme here is leisure activities. What type of leisure activities are popular in your country? Why it is important for people to have time for leisure activities? And why are some activities more popular than others? There are other questions here, but I'm not going to go through them all. So let's look at how we can answer them. Now to answer these questions, you want to use the AREA abbreviation. Now that stands for answer, so give an answer. After that, give a reason, give an example, and then the fourth one, which is optional, and that is to give an alternative approach or an alternative answer. So let's look at an example. So if I were to answer the following question, what type of leisure activities are popular in your country? I would say one of the most popular leisure activities in my country is playing football. So I've given an answer. And then now I will give a reason. So I would say, I think the main reason why playing football is so popular because it is appealing to both children and adults. Now I've given the reason, I will give an example. So I could say, for example, in my city, there's a football team for under 5-year-olds and there's also a football team for over 50-year-olds. Now I will mention an alternative approach. So this could be, however, although football is a very popular sport, I personally like to play basketball. Now that brings us to the end of this video. As you can see, there's not as much to remember for part 3 compared to part 2. So if you've benefited from this video, please hit that like button and subscribe if you haven't already.